Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Rob and today we are going to be painting some Night Lords, some quick and dirty Night Lords actually, because most of this paint project is going to be using speed paint. We're not going to be using any oils or anything like that, and it was quite fun to do. Like, it just took about an hour and a half, maybe a bit longer with some filming in there as well, and of course it's using one of the new Huron Blackheart kind of retinue models. Big thanks to Crusader Games for sending the box. I've done some stuff with the actual Huron model over on Patreon, and then this is the first kind of free YouTube tutorial this month for you guys. As I say, this is pretty quick and dirty. I don't think it's particularly a high skill level to be able to kind of achieve what we do in this video tutorial today. But I'm hoping that you guys get something out of it. You know, maybe it might be as simple as kind of like how to do lightning or how to do blue or whatever. But it's pretty fast paced, and you know, I think one of the things I would say about Night Lords is that lots of people struggle to get the color right, and I think that there's lots of different interpretations of how you can do the color. But one of the big things I would say is that the highlights, your highlight from dark to light on the model needs to be really dramatic. So on individual panels you need to go from almost, you know, a white to, you know, very very dark blue over a panel in order to get that kind of Night Lord's effect. Now what you can see me doing here is taking two parts High Lord blue and then one part Hive Dweller purple. I've mixed those together and then I've applied it over the blue over the armor, over the blue armor, and then you can see me here. I've done a first coat of this and then I'm going in with a second coat. Now this second coat I actually used just a little bit of speed paint medium in it, just to thin it down a little bit, but the first coat I actually just used straight out of the pot, so there was no medium involved. I felt like I just needed to go a little bit darker with the armor, and it's got this lovely purple blue kind of vibe that you'd expect with Night Lords, and you can always airbrush this as well. So if you're looking for kind of like a color to airbrush, you can airbrush this just straight through the airbrush. That's no problem at all. I'm just doing speed painting today, you know, just with a brush, but you can airbrush all of these steps if you want. So we're going to move on to Gothic Blue now. Now what you may have noticed is that that speed paint mix, that original mix that we were just using on our model, I'm actually just adding that as a little bit of a base to add to the Gothic Blue, almost just so there's less of a jump between the two, and also it just gets the Gothic Blue kind of moving a little bit as well. And then what you can see me doing, not very well because I'm doing this a little bit off camera, but it will come into the center in a minute, is I'm just creating some very rough highlights where I think the highlights are going to be on this model. Now, this is, I think, takes time, takes experience, and actually just takes a little bit of looking at people's Instagrams, particularly really strong painters out there, and just kind of going, well, how do these guys like highlight their Space Marine armor? Like, where should I be focusing on my Space Marine armor? Like, where should I be placing my highlights? And it's different if you're using an airbrush. I think that you can't be precise with an airbrush as you can with a brush. That's just, yeah, that's just the end of it really. And I think that like doing brush highlights like this is perfect for Night Lords because you have a lot more control about where the highlights kind of end up, which is really kind of positive. But of course if you're doing kind of like 50 infantry like this, it's going to be time consuming. I think kind of doing this blue armor though, it probably took me about 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes to do in total. Again, it is really rough, like, and there are very few kind of like edge highlights involved in it. And what you can see me doing here, you know, I did that first Gothic Blue highlight and then I've added some pale sand into it. An ivory will work, a white will work, and then where I hit it with that Gothic Blue, I'm trying to work within the band of light with this kind of this new mix where I've added a little bit of pale sand in, and I'm just working within the first highlight that I created with that Gothic Blue, and then that just allows me to kind of like create quite a cool highlight, which again, as I say, is perfect for Night Lords because we just want that real extreme. You know, I think that's one of the key things about Night Lords is that, you know, you see a lot of Night Lords, say, using like Cantor blue as a base, maybe a little bit of a highlight with an airbrush, and then once it's finished and done, it looks pretty boring and drab. And the reason is because you need the really dramatic highlights on Night Lord armor, I think, personally. Like, I think people struggle to get the blue right. Or if they got the blue right, it's more about this kind of extreme. So on like a shoulder pad, as I say, you want to go from very, very, very dark blue, even, you know, almost a black, to this to almost a very pale blue, or almost a white. And as you can see here, what I'm doing is I'm adding a little bit more ivory into the mix, and I'm just doing some further highlights, some specular highlights here, and I'll do one further highlight on top of this that you guys will be able to see, just to see kind of like the extremes of where we go to. And again, every time I add a new kind of layer of paint, or I add more ivory into the mix, I am just working within the band of light that I just put, the previous band of light that I've just put down. So we're getting smaller and smaller and tighter with our highlights here. This is quite a nice model to paint and practice on. I didn't think it was kind of like too complicated. I thought the posing is relatively straightforward. I've just, for this kind of like little conversion, I've just shaved off the red Corsair symbol. It wasn't particularly difficult, but it does work really, really well as some kind of like Praetor, or kind of like Huntsman or Sergeant or Champion or something that you might be using for like Horus Heresy, or for just for Night Lords in 40k. I think it works really, really nicely. Kind of reminded me of the characters that we see from Aaron Dembski-Bowden's kind of 40k Night Lords trilogy book. I kind of was like, yeah, this is how I kind of am expecting them to look, particularly the character who's kind of given himself over to Khorne. And you can see here just some final specular highlights, just to get those shadows. And like, this looks on camera, like looking at it at the moment, it looks like those fades and those blends look quite nice. They're really rough, like really rough in the hand. Like at a distance, it's fine, you can't see it too much. But like, they're really rough, but at a distance it does look quite cool. So don't worry too much about the blends and stuff like that. For the leather elements, I've used Satchel Brown, just straight from the pot, no speed paint medium mixed in with this. You could use hardened leather, it's more orangey in tone. I do use it for the wood a little bit later, but I thought that this Satchel Brown was probably more appropriate for this. And there's an awful lot of leather on this model, because all the skulls and stuff are attached with leather. And I've used the same speed paint Satchel Brown for the kind of like the holsters and the pouches and stuff like that. The skulls received a kind of very thin down brownish decay. So brownish decay is a speed paint, but I thin this right down. It's quite a strong and powerful speed paint, but it does work really well for kind of like skulls and stuff. But it's worth thinning right down. Probably you're looking at 50-50, I think, here with speed paint medium or water, just to get that kind of like tone of the skull. armypainter do have obviously kind of like specific bone kind of versions of speed paints, but I just quite like brownish decay. I'm using hardened leather here, just on the wooden elements. Nothing exciting. I don't do anything with it after this really. It's just a bit of hardened leather. It's one I go to all the time, just to make it a little bit different from the Satchel Brown. You kind of need something to differentiate the wood between the leather. And then moving on, we are using Slaughter Red on the kind of like the wings, the bat wings, I guess. And this is just a really nice base coat. It's similar to like Flesh Tearers. It's a very dark red kind of color. It's not as, I guess, vibrant as Blood Red. I've been using it a lot for World Eaters recently. It's just a really nice speed paint, worth having in the arsenal, particularly if you're doing something like Night Lords. And then for the trim, True Copper. I think, just while we're going a little bit slower on this True Copper, I think this model is quite interesting, because when I looked at it, I was a bit like, oh, this is going to take me some time to do, because there's so many like skulls and faces and stuff on it. But actually, just with speed paints, it wasn't a chore really to do at all. And actually, like the blood effects that we use a little bit later, over the faces and on the axe and stuff. That will do a lot of the heavy lifting. So you don't need to spend ages on kind of like the heads and stuff. Maybe, you know, the skulls, sure, but the heads and stuff you can just cover in blood and they'll look pretty cool. You know, you can see here, I haven't shown you in this video, but like the skull I've just given like a very pale kind of like purplish like wash over them to give them a kind of like a very sickly kind of vibe. It was some speed paint, I think, and yeah, just added a little bit of purple into something like a white or something like that, speed paint, and then just applied it over that area, and then it just gave it the kind of like very sickly look. So true copper used on the trim, and then heavy metal was used on the silver elements. And then we're just going to give this a wash. It looked a little flat to me, even though we had used speed paint, so I was like, it's looking a little flat, so why don't we just use this strong tone to kind of like tie everything together. So I used this on all the metallic elements, all the faces, all the skulls, just to add a little bit of definition. You know, you can add it here, there, and everywhere if you want to. I think I used it on the bat's wings as well, just to add, again, just a little bit of definition. A strong tone is like, it's just like a catch-all. Like, imagine Devlin Mud was a, you know, if anything, I think it is a kind of like a riff off Devlin Mud. It kind of like is a catch-all wash, this one, which is yeah, particularly valuable. You might be thinking, yeah, I use a lot of oils in my videos. And often creating something that looks like strong tone in terms of its color. The thing about strong tone is once it's down, I can't, you know, lift it off. The benefit of oils is that I can remove it a little bit later. So we're going to move on to ancient stone now, and then we're just going to do some highlights on the bone on the face and the kind of like the skulls as well. Just to add a little bit of luster back in. So obviously, you know, we've used a wash, so everything's been kind of been knocked back. If you wanted to leave it here, then you totally could. Like, it still looks cool, but it just adds a little bit of like life back into the model. Yeah, particularly to match those kind of like armor panels that have quite a lot of life into them now as well. You know, they're almost looking kind of like shiny because of the highlights that we've done on them. But yeah, just some thinned ancient stone. You know, use some war paint stabilizer to thin it right down. I feel like if you use war paint stabilizer, it gets as the medium to thin war paint fanatics. That's where you get the most out of them and the best out of them. So just use that just to thin it down, and then build up some highlights with some ancient stone, and then you can add in a little bit of pale sand into the ancient stone just to do kind of some final kind of specular highlights on the skulls as and where you feel is appropriate. The leather straps you can further highlight just with a light brown if you want to as well. Again, that's not, I don't think personally that's necessary, but I did do some little highlights there. So you can see I'm mixing two paints together here. Basically, I made blood chalice. So I've just said used blood chalice because I've mixed two paints together, and when I was looking at the rack I was like, I've basically made blood chalice here. So just use blood chalice as a highlight for your bat wings. I would go down something more pinky for the Night Lord's bat wings rather than something more orangey. I think it works a little bit better. Something desaturated rather than something warmer. You know, blue is a cool color, and it's got purple in it as well, so we want something quite cool in terms of its tone. We'll use something warm on the base a little bit later to add contrast in. Yeah, but we just want something quite cool in its tone. In terms of the metallics, the silvers, I've just chipped with a little bit of shining silver here. You know, just a light silver will work. You know, you can dry brush it as well. And then we're going to talk about the lightning. So what you can see me doing here, I've got Gothic blue, and I'm just mapping out some lightning over some areas. Now, I decided, because I was trying to be quick about this, I decided not to use any transfers. So I was like, okay, well, I'll do a fair amount of lightning here, show you guys like how to do it. So we can lay down some Gothic blue first, and then, you know, you can web this around your around the armor panels. And then working again within that band of light, we're going to add some auger blue to that mix, or to the Gothic blue. And it's pretty similar in tone to the tones that we were using in the first part. Like if you don't have Auger Blue, you could just add pale sand into it, more and more pale sand, and that would work really, really nicely. What we're doing is we're working within the band of light, so we're getting smaller and smaller and smaller here, while adding more and more kind of Auger Blue and pale sand into the mix. And as you can see here, I've added a little bit of pale sand into the mix, so it's getting lighter and lighter. So particularly those areas where the lightning forks is a good place to have, kind of like where it lightens up. But yeah, this is just a quick and easy way to kind of like go about doing some lightning. I think that looks pretty cool. I think lightning's always interesting as well. Like the Forge World transfer sheet has some lightning, so if you feel like you're not getting the kind of like look that you want, you could always use that transfer instead. I'm sure that there's like third-party companies as well that do kind of like lightning transfers. I would have thought those would be pretty easy to get hold of, or there'll be a company out there that you can kind of ask them to make some water slide kind of like decals for you, which is lightning. But I think the thing is that to get to this level, you need quite good brush control and a very fine brush as well. I think is the other thing. Like you don't want it to kind of look. I'm really trying to work within here the bands of light that I've kind of like created, and I think that it's important, that you have a very sharp brush to be able to do that. Right, we're going to use some dry blood here. Which is a little bit more matte and darker than fresh blood, and then just applying it with a sponge over the model, here, there, and everywhere. Particularly these faces, and then just wiping away kind of like the excess here. And in terms of those kind of like faces, that's all they kind of really need. Like, not so much the skulls, I don't think, but the faces where they've got, he's just literally chopped off somebody's head and then just attached it to his armor, or there's blood that has dried. I think kind of works really nicely and really, really well here. And it's also, again, it does like that dry blood does a lot of the heavy lifting for us. And you can just apply kind of blood splatters here and there, which works really nicely. And then finally, we're going to move on to the base here. So I've used Orange Blizzard by AK liquid pigments. I'm just applying this to the base straight from the pot, and then I get some white spirit. Clean white spirit, just put my brush in it, and then you can see I'm just kind of like feathering this out and thinning it out. You could, to be honest, I could have mixed this with a little bit of white spirit before putting it on the base, but I was just being lazy and didn't want to use another metal ramekin here, so I was just literally plopped it on and then just thinned it out literally on the base here. And I've just used like a dark like texture paint. You can pick them up from most company nowadays. And I've done the black rim, and here he is. He's all finished. This is it. A quick, easy, relatively easy, straightforward kind of like Night Lord scheme. Again, you can do this, with an airbrush. You can use the colours that I've used in order to kind of like create the highlights on the armour. And yeah, it looks pretty cool, I think. And hopefully you guys got something useful out of it today. And yeah, it's been pretty cool just to do a little project that just took a couple of hours. Big thank you to Crusader Games for sending this over. Like, really, really appreciate it. Big thank you to the Army Painter for sponsoring these videos, and of course a massive thank you to my Patreons. Like, you guys have been amazing over the past year. It's been a year since we've been kind of running the Patreon, and yeah, just really, really thankful and grateful for your support. And I hope that you guys are enjoying the videos. I hope you guys know that I appreciate the support you give. And if you're interested in signing up to my Patreon, it's just $3.99 a month, and you get tutorials and Q&As every month as well. So make sure you check it out, and I'll see you on the next one.